Hermann Göring walks through the Jeu de Paume like he owns it. Because he does. He moves from painting to painting, pointing, waving a hand, and his staff scrambles to write down whatever he says. He's building a private collection at his estate outside Berlin, and this museum in the heart of Paris is his personal showroom. The art on these walls didn't belong to him a year ago. It belonged to Jewish families across France who are now gone. Rose Valland stands nearby and watches every move he makes. She doesn't write anything down in front of him. She just watches, and she remembers. Göring never looks at her twice, and neither does anyone else on his staff. To them, she's the help, the woman who keeps the lights on and the floors clean. But she understands every word coming out of their mouths, and they have absolutely no idea. That's the story. The most dangerous intelligence leak in occupied Paris never carried a weapon, never ran from anyone, and never hid. She just stood there every single day and paid attention. Paris falls in June 1940, and the Germans move fast. Within weeks, the Einsatzstab Reichsleiter Rosenberg, the ERR, sets up operations in the Jeu de Paume, a small museum in the Tuileries Garden near the Louvre. It becomes a sorting and staging warehouse for looted art, mostly seized from Jewish-owned collections across France. The ERR tracks everything that moves through the building: who the original owners were, what each piece is worth, where it's headed next, and which Nazi official has claimed it. Thousands of works flow through on their way east. Rose Valland is already there when they arrive. She's been a volunteer administrator at the museum since the 1930s, keeping records and managing the building's operations. She's not famous, and she doesn't come from money. She grew up working class in the Isère region, and she put herself through art school while holding down work on the side. By the time the war starts, she's spent over a decade doing the kind of institutional work that nobody celebrates: cataloging, organizing, maintaining, showing up. She's exactly the sort of person powerful men look straight through. The ERR keeps her on because someone has to manage the building, and she's already doing it. She's useful in the way that furniture is useful. You don't think about it, you just expect it to be there. What they don't know, and what she never tells them, is that she's fluent in German. Think about what that means inside that building. The ERR staff aren't speaking in code around her, and they're not being careful. They talk openly about shipment schedules, destination depots, catalogue numbers, and the names of the families whose property they're processing. Train routes come up in conversation. Göring's personal requests get discussed in detail. All of it lands in her ears, and none of them notice, because why would they? She's the French woman who sweeps up and keeps the inventory in order. She doesn't matter. That miscalculation is the foundation everything else is built on. The ERR has guns, authority, and the full machinery of the Reich behind them. Valland has a secret and the patience to use it. By the end of this story, that turns out to be enough. She starts writing things down, not in front of anyone, and not during working hours while the ERR staff are moving through the galleries. She copies what she's heard and seen after hours, in private, logging the shipment details into notebooks she keeps hidden. Reference numbers, owner names, destination codes, descriptions of individual works. Every time a crate leaves the building, she tries to know where it's going. Göring comes back to the Jeu de Paume again and again. He visits over 20 times across the occupation, and each visit follows the same pattern. He walks the galleries, he selects pieces, his staff records the choices, and the works get pulled from the stockpile and earmarked for his estate at Carenhall. Valland watches every visit, and she tracks every selection. She's building a shadow inventory of everything moving through the building, piece by piece. The danger here is not abstract. The ERR has people inside that museum every day, and they're not stupid, even if their arrogance makes them careless. A few weeks after the Normandy landings, she learns that the Germans have put her on a list to be deported and killed. She stays at her post anyway, still walking the galleries, still watching, still writing things down after hours. The Reich's contempt for her is her cover. The more they dismiss her, the safer the notebooks stay. But by 1944, the situation shifts. The Allied landings in Normandy put the Germans on the back foot across France, and the ERR starts preparing to move the stockpile. A massive convoy is being organized to ship what's left in the Jeu de Paume out of the country, deep into German-controlled territory before the Allies can reach Paris. If those trains make it across the border, the art disappears into the Reich, and the chance of recovering it drops dramatically. Valland gets the route to the resistance with one instruction: don't bomb it, stop it. A bombed train full of paintings is still a catastrophe. She needs the cargo intact, not at the bottom of a crater. So they stall it. A rail strike breaks out along the line, and then comes a convenient mechanical breakdown, and then sabotaged track. Train number 40044 crawls a few miles out of Paris and stops dead near Aulnay-sous-Bois, carrying 148 crates and 967 paintings. Picasso, Braque, Degas, Gauguin, Modigliani. When French soldiers finally force the boxcar doors open, the officer in command is a young lieutenant named Alexandre Rosenberg. He looks at the paintings inside and he recognizes them. They belonged to his father, Paul Rosenberg, one of the most prominent art dealers in Europe, who had been robbed by the ERR and had fled France years earlier. The son, fighting with the Free French, has just captured the train carrying his own family's looted collection. And the Germans have run out of time to try again. Paris is liberated in August 1944. The ERR has already begun shredding records and evacuating personnel. Years of their own paperwork are going up in smoke, and the systematic documentation of what was taken, from whom, and where it went is disappearing with it. This is the moment Valland's notebooks become irreplaceable. She's been keeping the record that the ERR was destroying, and she's kept it for 4 years. By the time she walks out of occupied Paris with those notebooks, she's documented roughly 20,000 works. The owners, the physical descriptions, the catalogue numbers, and, crucially, the destinations they were shipped to. The ERR's own records are ash, hers aren't. The Germans had spent 4 years building what they thought was an invisible operation, and Valland had spent those same 4 years making sure it wasn't. Liberation arrives, but the art is already gone, scattered across Germany and Austria in depots, castles, and salt mines. The notebooks are the only map left. James Rorimer arrives in Paris as part of the Monuments, Fine Arts and Archives program, a small Allied unit tasked with protecting cultural property during the advance into Germany. Someone points him toward Valland. She doesn't hand the notebooks over right away. She spent 4 years keeping those records alive inside a building full of people who would have shot her for them, and she's not about to pass them to the first American officer who comes asking. She watches Rorimer, and she takes his measure. Only when she's satisfied that he understands what the intelligence actually is and what it needs to be used for, does she share it. What Rorimer gets is something no one else has: a working map of where the looted art went. Not a rumor, not a guess. Specific destinations, specific reference numbers, specific collections matched to specific locations. One name keeps coming up: Neuschwanstein Castle in Bavaria, the fairy tale fortress in the Alps. The ERR had used it as a primary storage depot, moving crates there in bulk as the occupation wound down. The Monuments men move on it and find one of the largest single recoveries of looted art made anywhere in Europe. 1,400 crates stacked inside the castle, still tagged with the same numbers Valland had been recording back in Paris. The recovery doesn't end there. Valland takes a commission as a French military officer, and she keeps working through the 1950s and into the 1960s, cross-referencing her notebooks against what's been found and chasing down the pieces that haven't surfaced yet. Many of the collections she documented belonged to Jewish families who were murdered during the Holocaust. The notebooks are sometimes the only remaining proof that those collections ever existed, that those families ever owned anything at all. The ERR processed roughly 22,000 objects through the Jeu de Paume. She was standing inside that building for nearly all of it. Nobody recruited Rose Valland. Nobody trained her, or gave her a handler, or told her what to do. She looked at what was happening inside that museum and decided, on her own, that someone had to write it down. The Reich had trains and soldiers and the weight of an entire government behind the looting operation. She had a pencil and 4 years of patience. After the war, France made her a captain in the military and one of the most decorated women in the country's history. She spent the rest of her life finishing what she'd started, tracking down the pieces that still hadn't come home. For more stories like this one, make sure you're subscribed to the channel.